Creativity and community are absolutely vital in challenging times. Welcome to Syncreate, a show where we explore the intersections between creativity, psychology, and spirituality. We believe everyone has the capacity to create. Our goal is to demystify the process and expand the boundaries of what it means to be creative. We talk with visionaries and changemakers and everyday creatives working in a wide range of fields and media, from the arts to science, technology, and business. We aim to illuminate the creative process, from imagination to innovation and everything in between. I'm Melinda Rothaus, and I help individuals and organizations bring their dreams and visions to life. At Syncreate, we're here to support your creative endeavors. So if you have an idea for a project or a new venture, whether it's a book, a piece of music, an artistic venture, entrepreneurial, whatever it might be, reach out to us at syncreate.org. We can help you get it off the ground. Our book, also called Syncreate, walks you through the stages of the creative process so you can take action on your goals. We also offer resources, creative process tools, and coaching to help you bring your work to the world, including a monthly creativity coaching group. So check out the website for more details. So our guest today is Prudence Arceneaux. She's a poet and chair of the Austin Community College Creative Writing Department, where she's a professor. Her work has appeared in various journals, including the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, Limestone, Texas Observer, African Voices, Inkwell, and many more. She's the author of 2 poetry chapbooks, Dirt and Liberty, and her new full-length collection is just out, called Proprioception. It's just been released from Texas Review Press. So welcome, Prudence, to the show. I'm so delighted
Thanks for having me.
To have you here today. Yeah, and I feel like kind of like Marcus, who we had on the show from ACC a little while back. You know, it's like I've been hearing your name for years, like mostly through Charlotte, but through other people as well. Yeah. And I'm just glad that we've finally gotten to connect directly.
Yeah, I've seen your face, but it's your voice that I keep hearing in my socials. And it's been like this soothing balm. So I'm happy to be in this space with that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Great. So you are a poet and a professor and chair of the creative writing department at Austin Community College.
Who knew a poet could do all the stuff?
I know. It's amazing. It's so great. And it's so great to have a poet in that role.
Yeah.
So many things I'm excited to talk to you about, but I, kind of one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on the show is because as I've been reading some of your work and just kind of like getting to know you as much as I can online, there's such a vibrance and a wholeheartedness in your poetry, as well as a sensuality. And I just have this sense of someone who is living life fully.
Trying to.
Yeah.
I'm trying to. I would argue that most of the people who work with me throughout my academic career would have described me as difficult.
How so?
Well, because there seems to be an abstractness to some poetry.
Yes.
A kind of disconnection.
Yes.
Which I love the idea of investigating the sublime, but most of us are living here on this plane.
Right.
I can recall one of my instructors asking, like, why do you have to have dandruff in this particular poem? And I was like, because it's a thing, right? We're humans and we're living a life, right?
Yes.
And it is part of our experience. And she'd referred to my stuff as earthy. And I thought, it's where we live.
Yes.
So
we
I'm
are
okay
here
with
on
that.
the earth.
Yeah, capital E, earthy. I want to live in all the experiences I can. I'm the person who's always looking for the free stuff to do around town.
Right.
And if there is something odd or intriguing, like someone just wants to make origami over at the Austin Creative Reuse, I'll go do it, right? I've not done origami before, but it's on my calendar to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a thing I wouldn't normally do. It's not organic to my existence, right?
Right.
So I want to go and do the thing. A few years ago, I'd seen this advertisement for a postcard convention.
Okay.
And I'm a writer. Like I collect stamps and envelopes, and if I mail you letters, my envelopes and stamps match. It's a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And I was very like, a postcard convention. Like, what do you do there, right?
Yeah.
And it was at the Boy Scout Center in North Austin. And I drove over there, and it was just these humans who'd been collecting postcards for decades.
Amazing.
And trading postcards. And there was something about the intrigue of other people's lives on the postcards. And I don't think there was much bartering going on. Like, I don't think there was much selling. It was just people standing around reading the lives of other people on these postcards.
Interesting.
And had I not just randomly flipped to like free to do in Austin, I wouldn't have known about it, right? So
yeah,
I want to live. I want to connect. I want to see all the things that there are.
Yeah, and postcards specifically, it's such a particular genre of communication, and you have to, have an economy of words because there's only so much space, and it's kind of a dying art a little bit
and
these
days. It was just a lovely thing, right? Because I think as humans, we try not to talk about how much we are voyeuristic.
Right.
And yet here I was in this room of people, and it wasn't a guilty thing. Like, we were all just learning about other people's lives and the places they'd been, and to flip through and find the poignant one, right? So everything is like, oh, wish you were here. It's so great.
Right.
We'll be here for another 4 days. Can't wait to get home, right?
Yeah.
And then to find the one where, obviously, I don't know. Like, but it seems as though this person didn't want to write a letter, maybe couldn't call, but here's a sadness here. Here's a thing that's been lost here, right? And you flip it over, and it's still the sunny palm trees and welcome to kind of thing, right?
Right.
So I want to be in that space. I want to make those kinds of connections and live life. So I hope that comes through my work, because it is the experience I'm having.
Yeah. And there's a visceral quality to it, like one of your poems from one of your earlier collections, Dirt, where you talk about, gardening with your father as a young child, and just, all the kind of sensory details of that experience, but also kind of how you're in a different place now.
Yeah, right. And and thinking of that one particularly, like the lessons that we learn.
Yeah.
Right? I think for me, that's the thing I want to do. And it may, for some people, seem like a distraction from being present in the moment, but it's an understanding of what I'm getting from the space. What am I feeling from other people?
Yes.
And when I wrote that poem, it was that kind of thing. Like, it seems like maybe I'm not paying attention, but I am, right? I'm able to list all the things that are happening in this space. So I go to a concert. Yes, I heard the music, but it's the other people around me that I'm also absorbing in that space, right? What is it that makes us human? That's really the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another poem that caught my attention is your poem, Menopause. And if I may, I would love to just read the first line.
Sure.
Which says, "For further reference, I go to love like a fire engine, to a 3-alarm, flashing and spinning, yelling across town." And I just love that, because that feels so real to me. Like we have these, again, sometimes abstract notions of love or romance or what that's like. And it's like, woohoo,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah. And I'd been in the state of menopause since my 30s, right? So as always, I was the youngest at everything with my friends. So here I am, the youngest hitting this phase.
Right.
And I did what I always do, which is I nerd out.
Yeah.
I just start investigating.
Yeah.
And reading as much as I can. I was taking in all this information. And so much of the information was about a wilting.
Yes.
A deadening.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see that happening. I didn't feel it happening. As I point out in the poem, like, I refused to allow it to happen. So I think I needed that proclamation. Like, for further, like, just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Colon. This is what's going to happen after, right? Because there's this assumption, larger societal, right, that as woman, we hit this phase and then everything lessens.
Right.
Instead of everything changes. And that's the thing that we just have to work through, right? It is the change of everything. What do you do now that your hair grays? What do you do now that it changes texture? Like, you make a new hairstyle.
Right. It's a new phase. It's a new part of the journey.
And it's almost as if we'd forgotten, which I think most of us try to, right? Puberty. It was another significant change, right?
Absolutely.
And we were so caught up in it that we weren't thinking about how we were changing. And now we get to live it. We get to enjoy it, and we get to choose how we're going to make that change. Yeah. And that's what that poem was for me, was I'm making a choice. I'm making a choice to not wilt.
Yes.
I'm making a choice to not fade away, which is why in that poem, I yell.
Yeah.
Because our society says that women don't, right? That we shouldn't. And so I just want that reminder. It's a fun one to read. When I read it, I preface that it's a crowd participation, which I don't normally do anywhere. And I let people know, like, you'll understand when we get there. And admittedly, I wrote this COVID, and so wasn't thinking about, like, having a bunch of people yelling back at me.
Right.
But it is so good to have an entire room of people, like, finally feeling free enough to yell, right? Yeah. To be in exaltation of their existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in your kind of commentary that accompanies the poem in the Academy of American Poets website, you talk about, how you were reading in your research that there's this derailing of sexual desires. And I think the poem is really a protest against that, right? Like, I don't want to be derailed.
Yeah. And if it is derailing, then I want it to be by that love, right?
Right.
The suggestion that I would not feel the same passion.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to go running through the city, right? You're going to see it. And who cares if it's gray hair that's yelling about it? Who cares if it's wrinkles that's yelling about? Like, we still feel the love. We all still feel those same things. That I think I might have mentioned that I, like, slammed the book closed and I threw it. Like, it was a terrible thing for this author to say, here, accept the loss of your passion.
Right.
Like, the passion is the root of everything. Not just love, right? Our existence. And this author said, just let it go. And I refuse.
Absolutely not.
I refuse.
Yeah. Good. Good for you. Well, I love that. And I just got this sense of humor also. There's so much humor and there's very serious topics that you cover in your work, but there's also this exuberance, this joyfulness at the same time.
Because I think you have to have that. So in my first collection, my first chapbook, Dirt, it was an homage to my family, specifically my father. I've always been a writer, but I was taking a long time to put together a collection, and it took his death for me to put that together.
Yeah.
But even then, I had to think about, like, the way my family grieves. Last week, I lost an aunt on Monday and a cousin on Wednesday.
Oh, gosh.
That's how it is in my family, right?
Yeah.
And all week long, I was still working, and people were interacting with me, and I was making jokes because that's how my family deals with death.
Sure.
There's so much of it in my family.
Right.
That part of it is about the humor of our existence. Like, we're so lucky to be here. Somehow we managed to make it to 50, 60, 100. Like,
right.
How do we do that thing?
Yeah.
That I can't not appreciate the humor of our existence as well, even as I'm thinking about death or I'm thinking about fears or anxiety, right? Like, it is the balance of our lives. It's the thing that helps us to keep going.
Yeah.
Right. So when I think about the jokes that I have, that kind of humor that underlies things, I know that for a reader, sometimes it's uncomfortable, right? Like, you were just talking about this death that's happened, right? but it's how I move through the world, right? There is a loss, but what's the energy that's coming back?
Yes.
Right? Like what's the balance of that thing? Because there has to be some kind of balance in there.
Absolutely. Same thing in my family. My sister and I developed almost, I think, this like gallows humor just to sort of get through life. And my mom had that too. And she actually passed away a few months ago. And I remember, sitting with her as she was beginning her transition process. She was still conscious. And there were things happening, like she was having these, shaking. And she was a retired physician. So I was kind of trying to ask her, like, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
Like,
go into your encyclopedic knowledge. Yeah.
And she goes, I don't know. I've never died before. And I just thought that was so perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And everyone else would be horrified.
Right. But that's life. That's the real stuff.
Yeah. And it has to be an acknowledgement of both things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell you this. I've been asked to read at my aunt's funeral. And I read at my dad's funeral, and I was myself, which means I was a little ornery and a little cantankerous, and I made some choices that the family was a little like, what'd you just do up there, right? And so even when I was asked, there was kind of an understanding, like, you're going to act right. Sure, I'll be better, right?
Right.
But even that, like, it was the humor of the family. Like, well, is she going to do the thing she did last time, or is she going to do something different, right?
And they did invite you back.
I know, they invited me back. And they wanted me in front of a microphone.
Right.
So I think I did a pretty good job.
That's right.
But so I think in my poetry, I want people to hear me. I want them to hear my voice.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not good at anything else in my work, it's voice.
Yes.
Right? Without having met me, without having heard me, I think in my work, you hear my voice.
Yes. It comes through so clearly.
Yeah. And so, like, that's the thing I'm always going to go back to is in workshops, people often say, like, maybe you get rid of this line. I'm like, that's the line that lets people hear, here's the joke of it, right? Or here's the truth of that thing. Like, it has to come through in my voice that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to hearing some more of your new poems. And I see you brought your book with you. So
hold on, which camera? That camera?
Out, yes, Proprioception. And a little birdie named Charlotte told me that you have a reading coming up in the beginning of April at Book People.
I do. I have my official book launch April 3rd.
Wonderful.
7 p.m. I'm really excited about it. It's the Texas Review Press has done a beautiful job.
Yeah,
they've been
gorgeous.
Really careful and kind with me in this work.
Lovely.
And I'm really excited for people to see this work and for people to read these poems.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited to hear some of them. And just by way of kind of introduction, I want to share one of the blurbs from your book, which was so lovely, by Naomi Shihab Nye, another wonderful Texas poet, kind of a treasure in our area. And she says, "C. Prudence Arceneaux is a brilliant poet of immense ferocity and velocity. The poems of Proprioception move with muscular grace, surprise, and startle, feeling utterly fresh, unlike anyone else's poems. How Arceneaux manages to be wry, sexy, contemplative, and rueful all at once is a wonder. I love the weed pulling. What a gift. Sprung from astonishment, whirling, shifting, pitching a mind into wild new states of being. These poems are alive." I mean, wow.
Yeah.
That is just...
For Naomi to say all of those, like...
Yes.
And it's such a perfect, I think, encapsulation, right? Of all the things of me. Yeah. It's... Yeah. I hope that people feel those things and see those things in my work.
Yes. So... can we hear some of them? Which ones did you bring to share with us?
Which ones did I bring to share? So I brought, I've got 3. They're, and they kind of showcase the nerdiness of me. I know, the print in here is kind of small. So that's why I have paper here. I feel like I want to start with one that shows the sexy.
Yes, let's have it.
But I should also say, I am very nerdy. Very, very nerdy. And I think it's a thing that people don't often think about with poets, the research of it. I think when people are thinking about fiction writers, nonfiction, they understand there's research involved. And I'm all about research, right? I find a thing and then I'm like, coming here today, the World Happiness Index. What? And that Finland has won 8 years in a row. Like, so obviously I have to go and investigate more. Like, how do you determine that thing?
I saw that too.
Right?
I know we're going down.
But like, how is it determined? Like, how do you find that?
How do you measure that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that'll be a good 4 hours of my life, that kind of thing. So, I'm not known for love poems. I'm just not. And this started with finding out that every summer on glaciers, glacial worms just pop up. And they don't seem to have any purpose. They're not, like in soil, they help with aeration. Like, there doesn't seem to be any purpose for them. They just show up.
They just exist?
Yeah. So I heard it. And I thought, what a strange thing.
Yeah.
Right? But also, I am a nautical disaster nerd.
Yeah. Okay.
So if the gods of the waters have decided humans should be shown their place, I'm investigating that thing. So Andrea Doria, Titanic, that whole thing. So that's what happened with this one.
Okay.
This is entitled Listening to Roger Wallace's Crazy Love. Each summer, 500 million 3-inch worms blackhead the pores of glacial faces. Scientists don't understand it, but don't call it crazy. Fascinating, scintillating, that's what you are. Worthy of study. But you've had the narrative arc all wrong. The main character, man or woman or water bear, just dies. No cancer, no tragic falls, no consumption, no rickets, not drunk. Just stops being. And no one cares. At the corner of North, 41 degrees, 43 minutes, 32 seconds. And West, 49 degrees, 56 minutes, 49 seconds. There's a room of velvet, brocade, and satin. Bespoke in liquid black. Symphony full. Bodies, strings, organs. A cellist's forearm in lunar tempo. No need to change the history. Of course they played while the ship dervished to the floor. If you were about to be rewombed in cold amnion, wouldn't you want your last thoughts to be of the first time you realized you could please yourself with concentration, practice, and the movement of pressured fingers? Why does it have to be crazy? What if your blood is supposed to be blue? What if the connection between bone and tendon is supposed to be broken, bones dissolved, besotted, malunioned? What if sound only travels through a rictus of agonies? What if, just what if, you aren't supposed to come up for air?
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. And it took me a long time to find out the location of the Titanic.
Yes.
Like to get the, and you'd think with our society's fascination with the Titanic, like to get the degrees and the, like.
Yeah.
But even then, every time I read, I always want to say hours and minutes. So I have to like keep reminding myself it's minutes and seconds because.
Yeah.
Even as a Texan, I shouldn't say even as a Texan, I have no sense of space. Right? I have no sense of the size of other things, right? I just know that thing must be smaller than Texas, right? So when I think about like latitude and longitude, like it's difficult for my brain to encompass the spaces of those things. So like there are minutes in between those. Like, right?
Yeah.
It was such a dive. It was such a dive.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Most people will find that in my work, it's water and space, like those two things I keep coming back to, which is kind of the cover.
Yes.
When people look at the cover, their first response is like, oh, yeah, she loves space. That's space. It's actually a remix of an image of bubbles underwater. So it's like both of my favorite things coming together in that cover.
Yes. Beautiful.
I love it. I love it.
So that's kind of one of my questions, like, what is it that inspires your poems? And it sounds like maybe you come across an interesting fact and, you kind of dive into that and see where it leads you. And how do we get from these like glacial worms to the band playing as the Titanic goes down, right?
Yeah. It is absolute random facts. But it's a thing that's been with me since I was young.
Yeah.
My parents had the encyclopedia set in our bedroom.
Yeah.
And often, I can't emphasize how much of a nerd I am. Often it would just be a random Saturday. Yeah. And I would just pick a letter and just go digging into the encyclopedia. And now that I'm older and writer, I take the random things that happen and I write them down. I can keep track of those things, but it's like, how do we make the flavor of the Cheeto dust?
Right.
Right. The weights of different oils. Like, I don't understand it, but I want to understand it, right? Like, if it has a weight, how do we do that thing, right? Like, and I get stuck on a thing because it is so random. And thankfully, I have a community that's used to that, right? I reach out to the person that I think is the closest to whatever the piece of information is, and then they reach out to other people because they know now, like, oh, you're doing something with this, right? It's going to show up. Yeah. And if I can't find the piece of information, then it sits aside until I find it. And then the rest of that poem will flourish around it.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with the random searches because that's the inspiration of it, right? I'm often telling my students, like, we're so busy that we don't even catch when our brain points out that thing.
Yes, that's so true.
Because our brain is always telling us, like, what's that?
Yeah.
Did he just say that?
Right.
Did she just do the thing? Right? Like, I let myself stop. So if you're with me, it's really odd until you learn, right? Like, I'm listening to what's happening to those people, or I'm mulling over the word choice that this person had, and I want to come back to it in something. Because when I think about poetry as this study of, right, this approach to understanding human behavior, we have to be open to all of the little things that make us human, right? All the quirks about humanity.
Absolutely.
And so, like, I want to be there for that weird stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's so perfect because this podcast is about the intersections of creativity, psychology, so the psychology within the poetry and spirituality. And I think, one of the most important components of creativity is that curiosity. Yeah. How do things work? Like, what is this phenomenon? Like that urge to go and explore and delve deeper and find out.
Yeah.
And
I think when I talk with people, and I tell them what I do, they go, "Oh, I'm not creative," right? Thank you for that. Yeah, because you're not leaving yourself open to it,
right?
I mean, well, okay. So stepping back, our society has decided it's not really worth it, right, to be creative. But giving yourself the ability, nope, that's the wrong word. Giving yourself the capacity, nope, wrong word. Hold on. Just giving into the desire.
The permission, giving yourself permission.
Yeah.
Like, right? We're all creative. We all have that potential.
Yeah.
We all have the instrument.
Yeah. But I think since our society has decided to monetize it.
Yeah.
Right? The reaction is, well, if I can't make money off of it. Like, to be clear. It's because I love it.
Yeah.
Right? And I internalized a lot of my dad's stuff. Like, oh, you can do the poetry on the side, but you got to get a job. Like, I get it. Our society requires this thing. I like having a roof over my head.
Sure.
Right? I like eating. But it's that there's so many people missing so much of existence. Right?
Yeah.
And they're afraid to take that step.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that, like, in my existence, like, they're willing to take the step, even the simple thing. In my family, birthdays, we call each other and we sing the worst version of the birthday song.
Right.
We can. Right? Just off-key, loud, right?
Yeah.
I also throw in a dance.
Oh, I love
So
this.
it was my sister's birthday recently, and I'm like dancing in the parking, doing this whole thing, and people were looking away. Like, I'm here celebrating another human. This is what we do, right? So sure, it seems strange, but that's what inspiration is, right? It feels strange. And until you're willing to open yourself up to it, it's always going to feel shameful, right? It's always going to feel like it's something that needs to be hidden. But the inspiration is going to come to us in the strangest places. So we have to be open to it.
And be open to the joy of it. Mm-hmm. And the fun and the play and the silliness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because we have to.
Yeah, because what's the alternative?
Yeah, right? And then to find the way to then share it with others.
Yes.
Right? Because I think that's the other thing, right? If we can't monetize the creativity, then it's not worthy of sharing with others. And it is, I mean, if nothing else, like when we look at all the social media, like people just making funny videos of things, like, and people love that. I follow this fellow who, he's got 2 huskies, right? Like, why would you do that to yourself? Like 2 huskies, right?
Right.
But that's kind of the thing of it, right? And it's 2 huskies, and you just watch the 2 huskies doing like
just talking to each other,
and that is a thing that we open ourselves up to. And so to get people to understand, like, that's the creativity of it, right? What is yours? What is your thing?
Right.
That you can then share with others that allows us to all remember we're part of this fabric, right? We're all connected in this thing.
Absolutely. And, there's many cultures like outside of the U.S. Like I'm thinking of like Ireland specifically, but I know throughout so many different places in the world where there isn't this separation, right? Of like either you're creative or you're not. Like creativity is much more just a part of everyday life. And you could be a farmer and a poet, and that there's nothing strange about that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I'm hoping, right, teaching creative writing, that I'm getting students to understand that.
Yeah.
Right? And do I think they're all going to become writers who want to publish? No. But if I can put people in that space where they have opened their lives just a little bit, right, that they're making a choice to go do something that they wouldn't normally do just for the experience of it.
Yeah.
And they're bringing someone else along, right? That if we can all start to make that kind of opening.
Yes.
Right? Because our shells are pretty tough. Right? They are.
Of course.
They are pretty tough, right?
And often for a good reason.
Sure, right? Like we have to exist. We have to make it through.
Right.
But like make a little hatch.
Yes.
Right? Just for a little bit of joy.
Yeah.
Because wherever people are living, right, there are spaces to find that joy. If it feels like your life is too confined, there are always those spaces to find that joy.
Absolutely.
And so I'm hoping that through work like mine that brings in the nerdy, that brings in this kind of investigation of that very specific, right, that people are realizing when they read it, that this is a way to live in life, right? That this kind of investigation is a thing that opens us up.
Yes. So that feels like a good opening for another poem.
Oh my gosh. All right. So this one, I think this one probably shows off my nerdiness a little bit more. I'm just gonna read it.
Yeah, please.
There's one thing I probably should explain. DeCaires Taylor, a sculptor who puts his work on the ocean, and so then marine life becomes incorporated into it. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So this one's entitled Moving Gate. And so if you have ever been in a school band or been adjacent to a school band, some of these things will connect with you. Moving Gate. South Carolina joins the 3 states who've gone back to the use of a firing squad. Proclamation, Fladry. Behypers us to no end in jagged parades. Our color guard of humanity, dead stick some of the execution. We glide step when needed, mark time, always. We declare ourselves uncogged from the machine, but still manage to queue for target practice in the grocery store. The quakes of our strings undulate past 73 kinds of cereal, 24 types of tampons, 50 types of pink salt. People have started saying nuclear again. The young are afraid of work. The Gulf of Mexico is a sacred space, its heartbeat plumbed daily. There aren't enough bodies there to compete with the Middle Passage, so Disney implants statues on the ocean floor off the coast of Clearwater, like they're priceless DeCaires tailors. White sands, white faces. The world isn't that small for it to be true. They could instead sift the sands, raise the architecture. Salt water doesn't dissolve what we have grown in the marrow, only burns when we have stripped away skin. It was all dumped. They were thirsty as they died with swollen tongue bones. Being lost is an event. Being dead deserves a gender reveal. We measure intervals at arm's length, and barrel rulers we watch like rats. They can't vomit, those word promisers, mistaking their inherited inability for a misery bomb. Choke, roll, flail, choke. That's how we're supposed to die, right?
So powerful.
I've been thinking about representation.
Yes, as one might.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this poem comes from that, right? The images we see, the images we absorb, because our world is so much more connected now in terms of like internet, TV, those kinds of things.
Yes.
And how we then take in those images, right?
And the erasures that are happening every day now.
Yeah. And trying to think of what stories last, right? And that's partly why I think about Disney, right? Like when I lecture and I ask students, like, well, what's the story of, I don't know, Pocahontas? And their immediate response is the Disney version. Hold on.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Back it up, right? Like, Little Mermaid didn't really live happily ever after, and everyone goes, "Oh no!" Right? So it's been on my mind in particular since about 2015. How we represent ourselves,
Yes,
and how and how we see ourselves moving through different spaces. Yeah, and so that's where that one was coming from.
Yeah, so timely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think when I wrote the poems in here, and
I feel like they were written yesterday.
a couple of them, I kept thinking like, oh, no one's gonna get this, right? Like by the time I go through, but for those of you who don't know, it's about a year or so. When you get your book accepted and then moves on, I thought, oh well, that's not gonna mean anything. No one's gonna.
Yes. And now it hits even more deeply.
Yeah. And so I hope, in reading these poems, I hope that those who are feeling the same kind of hesitation and the same kind of fear, they recognize it's there, like it's echoing in all of us.
Yes.
Part of the blurb that has been going out about the book is, I point out, like, I thought I knew how to live, right? A Black woman in Texas, like, I thought I knew how to live. I thought I knew what the rest of my life would look like.
Right.
And then there was that great upset. And since then, I've been trying to figure out, how do I live?
Yes.
Right? The perception of myself moving through this world.
Right.
And that's where some of these poems are coming from. Like, suddenly finding the ground shifting.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because I'd already known, like, okay, it's going to move a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I'm ready for a little bit of movement. That's
right.
Yeah. And then to like find whole pieces of it.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah. And day by day and moment by moment, nothing is certain.
Yeah.
And
And to still try and find life and inspiration in it.
Yes.
Right? To still delight in the things that you can.
Yeah.
In that. Yeah.
So how do you work with your students, like the students that are in your poetry classes, in this particular moment in time? Like, how are you, kind of talking to them about these things?
I ask them what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So the creative writing space is a bit different from composition and literature, right?